The King Naturus Advent is back. This is its third run, and a few things have changed since last time. This video is going to go over the skills for the boss and the ads, as well as what's changed since last time, and what is going to work and not work from last time as a result of the changes. So first up, the main change, which applies to all difficulties, is here. This S1, it now can't crit, and it'll penetrate more defense than before. It used to be 20%. And it also now attacks the front row first. This is really good because since it only attacks the front row, yes, your front row probably needs to be a bit tankier unless you're one-shotting it, but this thing here, it dispels 2 buffs, which was really annoying because before when it used to hit a random enemy, or a random one of your units rather, you couldn't really consistently rely on immunity buff to prevent your units from getting pushed back and get Stigma from the boss S1, but now you can, so you can just put immunity on those units and this will always hit the front unit. But the increased damage you might need to make your front unit a bit tankier now. And this, it now gives an extra turn to the ad after it uses it. Before, it used to give speed buff and a 30% CR push, so it just makes it take its turn instantly now, which isn't a huge deal because it's only going to hit the front line. So these are good changes overall to reduce the RNG from these guys. And the next change is only in Epic Hell. So in Epic Hell, you have to dispel these mana buffs. And for this one, if you fail to dispel the buff, once you reach phase 2 and 3, instead of only decreasing skill cooldowns by 3 turns, which was here last time, it now also gives an extra turn to all allies. So you're pretty much dead. I don't know if it's going to be possible to clear Epic Hell on a true one-shot anymore because of this extra turn. The extra turn is going to push up the boss, and it's going to use its S3, which I think changes in the other phases. It dispels 2 buffs, so you're going to lose your attack buff. You'd have to re-attack buff, and phase 2, specifically, it summons up to 2 mushrooms again, and when these mushrooms are up, it takes less damage. Yeah, it greatly decreases damage received when there's a remaining ally, so it's pretty much not doable anymore, I think, because you have to kill the mushrooms, but if you kill the mushrooms, it'll give him an extra turn, and he'll summon the mushrooms again. So it's probably not doable to full one-shot this guy anymore, but it's probably still fine to just clear phase 1 normally, and then one-shot the other 2 phases. And speaking of clearing phase 1 normally, now, when an ally is inflicted with Provoke or Redirected Provoke after being attacked, you have to hit it 5 times to dispel this mana buff so that it won't have this thing happen. This used to be Stun, now it's Provoke or Redirected Provoke, which is also a good change because before, I never saw anybody go for the Stun condition. Everyone just one-shot it, and the only unit I ever saw actually clear the Stun condition was Winter. And as we all know, Aespa is not a real thing anymore, so switching to Provoke is much more accessible. So this is a good change. One other thing to note is that this doesn't specify if this has to be a single target attack, it just is attacked. But last time it was bugged, and it only worked if you hit it with a single target attack. So hopefully they have fixed that. That bug was probably because the first time this came around, it was single target only, and the second time it wasn't supposed to be, but they never actually changed it, so hopefully that will get fixed. And that's actually the only changes for this advent. It's just the skills on this ad, and then the mana changes for phase 1. So phase 2 and phase 3 are completely unchanged. And now we can go over a general summary of all of the skills for this boss. Here's the usual sheet that we use for Advent, and I'll have this in the description, and I will continue updating it before the Advent starts, and after the Advent starts, we will update it more as we find more units, because it's been like a year and a half since the last one, and a lot of these team comps need updating due to some of these changes. So first up for phase 1, the matching element bonus is speed, which doesn't really matter if you're one-shotting. If you're not one-shotting, speed is a very good stat. You should probably try to get this. So first up, it's passive. Daydream Joker is still the best in slot artifact, but it does do half as much damage. But you're going to want to use it anyways. And then it has a 50% CR push decrease, which stacks additively with Stigma. Stigma also decreases your CR pushes by 50%. So the 50 plus 50 will become 100. And then the Epic Hell I'll go over later. And also, speaking of Stigma, at the end of somebody's turn, or one of your allies rather, they will deal damage equal to 12% of their HP to all of your allies that have Stigma. So Cleanse is really nice to get rid of the Stigma or immunity buff. At the start of the fight, the boss will use its S3 and summon 2 adds, which will only happen once, but the adds are really tanky, so it doesn't matter that it's only once because you're not going to kill them. And then we can look at its skills. So the S3 that gets used at the start of the fight will inflict the Decaying Curse on one of your allies, the highest attack one. And in order to get rid of this, you need to use a non-attack skill. So units that open with a non-attack skill are really, really good. Ideally, it needs to be the skill that they use first, because every time they take a turn, or they use a skill rather, it'll dispel all debuffs from the boss, and it'll also, while they have this effect, decrease their attack and crit chance by 70%. So this pretty much makes your unit do no damage and actively grief you until you get rid of this. There are one-shot setups for phase 1 that just kind of ignore the fact that this exists, but in general, you probably want to get rid of this, especially in slower runs. And then aside from that, it'll hit all enemies, decreasing CR by 15%, 30% in Hell or above, which are the difficulties that you should be aiming to do. And it'll also inflict Stigma. So you notice that this doesn't strip, and its S1 also doesn't strip. So immunity buff is pretty good, just because you can block pretty much all of the effects from this boss. So the S1 though will attack 2 enemies, decreasing CR by 20%, and it also inflicts Stigma, which in Hell or above will ignore Ephra's, just the inflicting Stigma part. And it'll also increase CR of a random ally by 20%. So this is pretty basic S1, and you can use immunity to block the effects, but only on your back ones, because like I mentioned, the adds strip on their S1, but they only hit front now, so at least you can block it on your other units. So might as well go over the add skills too, because their S1s will hit the front line, but they will decrease, or they will strip 2 buffs and inflict a random debuff. This random debuff is either decreased speed, sleep, or unbuffable. Not too huge of a deal, but it is a bit annoying for your front line. I'm not sure how much Ephra's the adds have, actually. That's something that I'll test and I'll probably mention here once we find out. So then the S3 will heal the boss and dispel 1 debuff from all allies, and then give itself an extra turn. This is not a huge deal in Hell, because you can just kind of blast the boss, and it doesn't matter that you're... it doesn't matter if they're healing, because you just kill the boss anyways. For Epic Hell though, this is very annoying, and you're probably going to want to spam it with Provokes. And the reason you use Provokes is because the Epic Hell gives it a retaliation mana that you want to dispel. And in order to dispel it, you need to use Provoke or redirected Provokes. So you might as well keep on using those and lock down the adds so they don't heal as much. And then if you fail to dispel this in phase 2 and phase 3, every time you attack the boss, it'll give an extra turn to every unit on the field, or every unit on its side of the field, and also decrease skill cooldowns by 3 turns, so you're probably going to die, so you should dispel this. And then if we're looking at unit recommendations, for non-attack skill units, Vivien's probably going to be the most common one, because everybody has her. You can just make her the highest attack, and then she'll instantly cleanse the curse with S3. You can also give everybody immunity buff. Really, really good. You can even give her the cleanse EE, so that she will cleanse the initial Stigma from the boss's S3. And here are some other options, but mostly you're just going to be using Vivien. Top model Luluka's pretty nice if you're trying to cleave, because she'll do all of her stuff. She'll get rid of the curse and also CR push everybody. I used her to cleave the first phase last year, but we'll see what we do this year. And then aside from that, some DPS units, just some stuff here. And then for Epic Hell, you need a unit for Provoke, which the best in slot is going to be Senya, because her S3, AoE Provoke, and then she gets the counter buff, and if you give her enough Ephra's, every time the adds attack her, she'll hit them back and then provoke them again, and you can just keep on provoking them. So I think she's going to be a really, really strong option. Aside from that, the Provoke unit's not looking too hot, honestly. There's these guys. There's also Yolha. I forgot Yolha exists. Yolha. So the new ML Lua that's coming out has a lot of provoke in her kit, but that's it. All of her other stuff only procs on heroes, so I don't know if she'll be any good because she's only provoking. And then there's some other units that have some kind of provoke, like Sea Armin, Yolha, and even Dark Corvus all have provoke on their S1s. But it's pretty much just that, so their utility is not fantastic. Conqueror Lilius only provokes 1 turn on her S2, which can be 2 turns if you soul burn it, I guess. But she does have really good utility outside of her outside of her provokes, which is nice. And then there's Bad Cat Armin, who might be fun for memes because she has a good amount of provoke in her kit. She's got the counterattack thing going on. Phase 1, compared to last time, shouldn't be changed that much. It's just, for Epic Hell, it'll be completely different. None of these Epic Hell Phase 1s are going to work because they are going to... For the one-shots, you can't really one-shot anymore because of the extra turn that they got added. And then for the other ones, these are all stuns, and you need provokes now for the slow runs. So now we can move on to Phase 2. Phase 2, the matching element bonus is HP. Doesn't really matter too much. This one, you don't have to worry about matching the bonus. Let me see if I even bothered. Yeah, usually it doesn't really matter that much. HP is still nice to help you tank, but it's not something to worry about. For the passives, same as before, Daydream Joker, CR decrease, except now there's a new one. When there's a remaining ally except for the caster, greatly decreases damage received. So, this is relevant because every time the boss uses S3, it will summon 2 adds. And you have to kill these adds. These adds are actually killable this time. You have to kill these adds in order to actually deal damage to the boss. So the S3 also will dispel T-buff, so immunities, you can't just block everything with immunity this time. And it also inflicts stackable decreased defense, which means that if you take too long in the fight, you're eventually just going to die because it's constantly decreasing your defense. It also increases its speed for 2 turns. And also, if you didn't kill any mushrooms, or you didn't kill a mushroom, when the boss S3s again, it'll decrease skill cooldowns by 1 turn, so the mushroom's probably going to explode, and you want to kill the mushrooms anyways, just to deal damage to it. So it's kind of whatever. And then this S1 attacks 2 enemies, pretty much the same as Phase 1, except it now also triggers a random dual attack from an ally. So this is something that you could potentially abuse. Maybe some units that counter dual attacks could be usable here. Like there's Fenris, LHC, Rowana. Maybe something to work with. And then here we've got another passive, Mana of Decline. After being attacked by an enemy who has a buff, increase the CR of a random ally, or an ally except for the caster rather, by 20%. And then the more important one is if you attack him and you have 3 or more buffs, then he'll activate his S3 as an extra attack. So you definitely want to keep an eye on your buffs. And also if you attack him while having Stigma, he'll dispel 2 debuffs from an ally who has debuffs. So you definitely want Cleanse to get rid of the Stigma. This is just basic phase shift info. And then while you're in Epic Hell, there is another mana buff to potentially remove, which just makes it so when you're in Phase 3, if you hit him, he'll counter with the basic attack. And in order to dispel it, if you want to, you need to have 3 or more debuffs on the boss, and then attack him. And hit him 4 times with a single target attack. So this isn't mandatory to dispel. Most people just one-shot the 3rd phase anyways, and there are certain setups for Epic Hell where you can just kill him and not really care about the counterattack. But if you want to dispel it, make sure you bring units with a lot of debuffs. And then we can look at the mushroom. Pretty basic mushroom things. S1 heals itself, CR pushes and decreases your attack. S3 just makes it explode, stripping 1 buff and 2 poison effects. And the damage dealt is proportional to how much HP it had left. And then also, it has a passive, where every time you attack it, it gets speed. And if an ally except for the caster is attacked by a single target attack, increases CR by 2 turns. But also when it dies, it gives a random buff to all allies for 2 turns, which can be annoying because Rage gives the boss attack and speed. And then Barrier will sometimes just give the boss a bunch of extra HP suddenly, which can be annoying when you're one-shotting because sometimes he'll have the barrier and sometimes he won't. So you will have to account for the barrier getting added. So for unit recommendations, you're definitely going to want some AoE. Just use Mercedes. Mercedes is really, really good. You can just mascot Hazel and then Mercedes and she'll one-shot the ads. And then you can just kill the boss normally after that. And you can either do that slowly or you can just one-shot it. So there's a couple different setups that you could use here. If you're doing it slowly in Epic Hell, you might want to use units like Valen Sezin or Cecilia because they give a lot of debuffs. And then some of the DPSs, there's Straze, Milim or Spectre Tenebria. You can spam Soul Burns to try and kill the boss in technically one shot for Epic Hell. So there's a lot of options because, so like I mentioned, Hazel and Mercedes pretty much instantly wipe out the ads and you still have attack buff and Mercedes does more damage. So you can just kind of put whatever their DPS here. And if you don't have Mercedes, you can run something like Kana or Vivian with a second AoE DPS. So now we can look at Phase 3, which in Phase 3, normally everybody just one-shots this phase. Nobody ever plays the mechanics because there's a lot of Phase 3 is always overloaded with mechanics and you're at the end of the fight, so you might as well just one-shot it. So we can look at the skills anyways. The passive, Daedrin Joker, is only 50% effective as usual, but use it anyways. The CR decrease thing. And also, in Hell difficulty or above, takes a turn at the start of the battle and inflicts Suppress Spell, which is just its seal, and it also decreases your dual attack chance by 30%. This is actually a good thing because it has another passive where if you hit it with a counter, dual, or extra attack, it'll activate its S3. So this just makes it so you can't accidentally dual attack. And then also, because your units are sealed, remember that you won't have any S2 passives. So we can look at its skills now. Or we can, okay, one more thing for the passive is that it decreases damage suffered, and if you inflict debuffs up to 4 debuffs, it'll take more and more damage. So you want to be applying debuffs on it, besides just Death Break to increase the damage taken. And also, if you hit him with Stigma, it'll increase his CR by 15%. So you probably want to cleanse your Stigma, which you'll also want to do for other reasons. Because in this S3, it dispels all debuffs from the caster, then it attacks you, decreasing your attack for 3 turns, and inflicting the stackable decreased defense just like in Phase 2. But also, when you have Stigma, it'll penetrate your defense by 70%. So you probably want to cleanse the Stigma to not die, which is also why we just one-shot it. So this cleanses the boss, gives you the stackable decrease defense, and also inflicts decreased attack, which you want to cleanse. Then S2 strips your buffs, and also increases stackable decreased defense, and it gives it speed and defense buff, which you probably want to strip. And then S1 attacks 2 enemies, the usual CR pushback and Stigma. And in Hell or above, it'll ignore F-Res for the Stigma thing, and also dispels 1 buff. So there's a lot of things you probably just want to one-shot it. No ads in this phase, but this actually needs to be updated because the best in-slot DPS was Hwa-Young before, because she gets sealed and suddenly she can crit, which made her do a lot of damage, but she got balance changed and now her S3 got its multipliers reduced, plus it scales off attack now, so probably can't hit max pen, and even if you did, you are going to do less damage. So we're just going to delete this, and there does need to be a little bit of testing done to see who can be used here. So one problem is this thing here. Because you can't counter dual or extra attack, that removes Afternoon Soak Flan from the equation. Kayn is kind of removed. If you can somehow one-shot with his S3, he might be an option for Epic Hell. But for Hell, because of debuff RNG, probably not a great option. Melissa might be good. I'm going to try Melissa at least, because she can S3 into S2, and surely that's enough damage, probably not. So this is definitely the part that needs the most testing, and I will update this after more testing is done. So that's it for the pre-guide. I hope this helped anybody who was trying to prepare for the Advent in advance. And once the Advent actually starts, I will have team comps for both Epic Hell and Hell.